Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. This is the first video I'm posting on my channel, and it's very much going to be a stream of consciousness thing, because there's nothing up on it yet. So I thought might as well cover the recent big deal political event going on, the Canadian election, and give my 2 cents, because naturally this is a channel about US politics, so I might as well talk about Canada. And overall, the way I can summarize the video within the first minute, so if you want to click out after this, feel free, is the Canadian election was no one won. Actually, one group won. It was the Bloc Québécois. I currently have the CBC's election page up, so I can have something to reference and show you guys. And as you can see, basically, the election didn't turn out the way the polls did. Now, if you're in the United States and aren't following the Canadian election, essentially what happened is the Liberal Party was, I believe, 177 votes. They had a majority, which means they could control. As you can see, you need 170 seats to win. However, as predicted, it would be a nail-biter between them and the Conservative Party, each with it ranging between, one party's going to get 123 votes, and the other's going to get 122, and it's going to be super close, so one may need to form a coalition like the Liberals with the New Democrats, or the Conservatives with the People's Party, because, yeah, they're really gonna have a big night. Ugh. But it was a night of losses. The Liberals failed to keep a majority, which, actually, for everyone, there's a win and a loss in every single way. So for the Liberals, their win was they have an outright lead over everyone else. It looks like they're going to finish off with 157, 158 seats. The downside, their loss, is the fact they are no longer the majority party, and we'll get to where they were hit the worst in Western Canada when I scroll down in a little bit, because I have a few thoughts on that as well. The Conservatives, their victory was they have gained seats, quite seriously. They gained 22 seats, at least, as you can see here, which, that's a victory. Whenever you're a party and you gain seats, that's a victory, but for it to be a supposed nail-biter, and then to have your entire party be 30 or so seats behind the leader isn't that great, especially when it looks like you might get a larger amount of the popular vote. Now, we haven't gotten the end of that, but as you know, as an American, if you're an American, losing the popular vote, or winning the popular vote but not winning the election, is a little bit of a sore spot. The Bloc Québécois, they're the only group I can say had an outright victory, and that's because they gained 22 seats and have basically regained control of Quebec. It keeps the myth about Quebec, sorry about that, the myth about Quebec that they are a volatile province, and nearly called them a state, a volatile province at the federal level in Canada, or confederal level, I guess, I don't know. True, and if I have to give them a loss, they mostly took seats from the New Democratic Party, or the New Democrat Party. I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's New Democratic. I think they mostly took seats from that, and there is a very popular theory that the reason they were able to retake these seats, at least partially, or at least why the New Democratic Party wasn't as popular for an American audience, is because they're led by a Sikh. You have to forgive me. I've been following election results for about the past 4 hours, so I'm a little tired. A Sikh. I'm very sorry. Sikh. If I was gonna edit this, I'd edit that out, but I can't. I read it for years as ski for some reason, and was was politely corrected at one point by a Sikh, and I now feel very silly. But that he is a Sikh, and the Quebec has not been very welcoming to people who could be mistaken for being Muslim, and also such as their recent burqa ban and things like that. So it is possible that, so if we have to give the Bloc Québécois loss, it might reinforce some very stereotypes about Quebec that imply they are quite racist. The Dune Democrats, I have trouble saying they had a win, like I had trouble coming up with a loss for the Bloc Québécois. For the NDP, their loss is pretty obvious, so I'll talk about that as I try and think of a win for them. They lost every seat in Quebec. They lost a good chunk of their seats in Alberta, in Western Canada. The fact that they are currently down 18. Okay, so the Conservatives are now up 24. 2 more have just been called for them. Yeah, and the Liberals are down 30. This is you can't phrase this as a win. I can actually connect it to, it's like when Barack Obama walked out of the 2010 midterms and had basically lost Congress in the states. Arguably, they did decent, but overall it's going to very much hinder their ability to govern. They will always have to go to another party for aid, and as a group, they are not progressive enough that they'd want to side with the New Democratic Party, and they're also not conservative enough, they'd want to work with the Conservatives. Maybe the Bloc Québécois will give them something if they agree to, let Quebec not pay taxes anymore. But, yeah, the New Democratic Party, they got hit hard. In a soft prediction, I don't think right now Jagmeet Singh will resign immediately. I think the fact that most of the losses were in areas where the Liberals lost as well does not show a weakness in his leadership, rather a national shift. However, him leaving would not be unprecedented. They've lost almost half of their seats. That is good enough of a reason to resign. However, I don't see that I also see that they have a reason not to. And like I said, their losses in Alberta could be expected due to the fact that, let's face it, Alberta wiped them out in the provincial election. So their loss is obvious. If I have to give them a win, it's the fact that they are the only party that seems viable to form a coalition with the Liberals, and give them stuff, and give them what they want, and this makes them kingmaker, in a sense, because the Bloc is not going to be siding with the Liberals on everything. In fact, I imagine on a lot of things they want to do, they won't find any help. And so they can function as kingmaker on most issues. They might be able to, when the Liberals will inevitably try and do something to improve Canadian Medicare, they could push for universal pharmacare or some process with it, maybe even try and do electoral reform. But in the Americas in general, and mostly in Canada in this case, they've never had a history of coalition building. In the U.S., our coalitions have always been the party, so we've arguably either had really solid coalitions or non-existent coalitions, no middle ground. For Canada, they've never really been able to form a coalition, so you don't end up with a Europe-like scenario where you have the majority coalition and the minority coalition, or the opposition coalition, the government and the opposition. You end up with essentially a bunch of squabbling parties periodically coming together for certain votes. And for all we know, in 2 years' time we're going to be talking about how the Trudeau government has been absolutely crippled for the next 3 years until the election. And one other comment I'm going to make. Right now I'm making the prediction there will not be an early election called. There's not going to be some sort of, Justin Trudeau sees an opportunity so he's going to call it, or some weird conservative New Democratic Party Bloc Québécois bloc that comes together to call an election. Okay, so the Green Party, their win and loss is really easily. Win! They got another seat! They might be considered a real party now! Downside, they're still the Green Party, and they have 3 seats. So, yeah. The Independent, Raybould, the one who was in the scandal with Trudeau, I believe. She might win a seat. Bully for her. And can make Justin Trudeau have a bad time over it. The People's Party. It's a loss because they got no seats. It's a win because, arguably, Scheer got the amount of seats everyone was expecting to get for the Conservatives. So it could be a win that, but theoretically, if you take some of the seats in some of the People's Party's ridings, at least from what I've heard, Conservatives could have eked some wins out over maybe the NDP and the Liberals, which could have made things a little bit more competitive. So he might have proven that you need the, albeit seemingly small, Bernier wing of the party to turn out. And I'm stretching for that one. As for other, they got 50,000 votes, so good on you, Mickey Mouse. Okay, now let's go down to here, and the biggest result from here, because I think the fact that we're going to witness what for Americans I'll refer to as the Obama years, after his first two, where you basically have a lot of people arguing and not a lot of shit getting done, is about to descend upon Canada, for better or for worse. I don't know how it could be for better. But the big change here is the fact that there was a sweep here in both Saskatchewan and Alberta for the Conservatives. And the fact they've made gains also in Manitoba and British Columbia. And they also made massive gains in the city portions of Ontario. The Greater Toronto area, plus like London, Windsor, etc. So genuinely, the Conservatives made great gains. I say this as a person who does not support the Conservatives, but they did a good job. The main thing here is the fact that I think one seat in Alberta. Let me see if I can zoom in. Oh, I can. Yes, so I'm currently on tablet mode now, so we'll see if it lets me do anything. Nope, it glitches the hell out. Okay. Don't do that. So there was one seat which was a reddish orange. I think it went NDP. And I think in Saskatchewan there is currently one Liberal riding left. This is bad. In Canada they have something called Western alienation for all of the Americans listening. I imagine a majority of you are Americans. Much how Quebec attempted to separate when it got pissed off at Canada and now has amazing benefits for doing that. The western part of Canada has very much been separated from the East, both culturally and, frankly, economically. The East is very tech service-based. The West is very agricultural-based, except for the Vancouver area. And the way I can put this is, there's been brewings on the internet of an Alberta exit, where Alberta leaves and forms its own country or joins the U.S. I will make a video about this further. I'll also, probably after this, make one for Saskatchewan, because they've had a historic secession movement. And speaking frankly, right now Quebec is very well situated. To give you a light overview, they have these things called equalization payments to make sure each province gets enough money, which means the richest provinces have to give to the poorest provinces, and right now this is, overall, the burden is very heavily placed on Alberta, from my understanding, which has resulted in we could leave. There's also a geostrategist, I believe, named Peter Zehan, who made a big stink about the best move for Alberta would be to join the U.S., so that movement started again, because Quebec's probably not leaving, and I'll make a video on Quebec separation as well. But for right now, this is not what you want to get. You have, overall, a very, very, very concentrated anti-government take in the West, and in the East you have a very pro-government stance. Oh, Jagmeet Singh, I didn't realize he was in danger of losing his seat. He might have not been. There is no way for me to look for more info. So, okay. You just told me this. Goodbye. Yeah, but this Jagmeet Singh won his seat, but he may not keep his status as head. Yes, and to give you an idea, also, Canada has never had a person of color as their head of state, and has only ever had, I believe, a single woman who lasted only a couple of days, and is considered their worst prime minister. So, that there might be other prejudices against Jagmeet Singh which weren't really addressed, due to a belief that basically there's a subconscious idea you have of everything called a schema. And if you're used to one thing being your schema, in this case the head of your state being an older white man, because Justin Trudeau's not very old, he's actually quite young, but a white man, usually a straight white man, then your viewpoint is you will inherently view something that is different as less presidential. That's why, in my personal opinion, Barack Obama was a big deal, not just for the civil rights movement and African Americans in general, but also because it completely changed the schemas of Americans who grew up during that time. I grew up during the Obama presidency, and now if you ask me what my default schema is for a president right now, it's actually a black man. And many people I know whose informative years were during Obama, despite the fact that literally every other president has been a white man, that breakdown of that barrier is very important. So that could be at play as well for Jagmeet Singh. You have to forgive me, I'm very tired. I lost my train of thought. So the big thing is, and I think this is going to be a sleeper issue, which means, and for the record, when someone says something's going to be a sleeper issue, they don't mean that it means it's something they think is going to happen, but signs don't necessarily fully point towards it yet. So it's an educated guess. Meaning, if it doesn't happen, we can just claim, oh, well, it was a sleeper issue, so it didn't come up. Just so you know. The lingo. But my sleeper issue is I think there will be an attempt at an Alberta secession referendum. I think this is most likely. I think it will happen even if Bernie Sanders I think it's actually more likely if Bernie Sanders wins in 2020 and passes something like Medicare for All. Because right now Alberta's feeling very, very, very pissed off at their at the central government of Canada. And clearly, so is Saskatchewan, given the fact they kicked the Liberals to the curb, too. I can't remember their exact original ridings, so you'll have to forgive me. But I believe they threw out the NDP as well. And both of these provinces have been very, very isolated to the extent that when Quebec was looking at seceding, not only did the maritime provinces, these ones over here, come to have this sort of weird coming to terms with becoming U.S. states. You've told me this 3 times now. Saskatchewan secretly looked at joining the United States, which would have made the United States a giant middle finger to the world, which I think would have made political cartoons during Donald Trump all the more interesting. But I do wonder if there'll be an independence referendum and it'll become Canada's Brexit. An issue no one's expecting to go no one's expecting an issue no one's expecting to pass, and then it passes. Like I said, I'll discuss more about that in a future video, but I do think Canada needs to beware, especially because I could see how many nations like China and Russia would view this as the perfect opportunity to drive a wedge between the U.S. and Canada. Not to mention, the loss of either Saskatchewan or Alberta would basically guarantee that Western Canada, Manitoba over, would all but be forced to join the United States. I don't care what people say. You can't have a country that has a giant block in the a giant hole in the center, which is another country. But like I said, I'll discuss that more in another video. But overall, it's looking like we're going to have a liberal majority. I don't think they will go to the bloc or the NDP to attempt to form a coalition because they are so close. They're only 14 seats away from having a majority, which, given the fact this also looks like a boon to them because they way outdid their predicted results, I say they will probably try and rule as a minority of the minorities, despite the fact that they won't even have won the popular vote, which I think could very, very much hurt them. And as you can see, popular vote to seats does not match up well in Canada. I think it's actually worse than the US. Now, also, these are seats that they lost in very close elections, but still, it hurts them. So I will end this video here, and apologize for my ramblings. But those are my thoughts on the matter after 4 hours of watching election coverage, and it being 15 minutes after midnight. So I will end the video here. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff I'm supposed to call to action you to do, and push the notification button. Please subscribe if you want more content, yada yada yada. So, that being said, have a wonderful day.